Hi, my name's Anna and I'm an Education Officer at Galway Atlantaquaria. Today we'd like to share with you some information about some of the animals you can find along the Irish shoreline. This is Grattan Beach close to the aquarium and where you can find lots of different plant and animal life. Now, I know what you're thinking, where am I going to catch the fish if the tide is out? Well, believe it or not, this is the best time to go search for animals. We'll need to walk all the way out to the seaweed to the lower shore where we'll find rock pools. The animals living in these pools are very good at camouflaging, so we will have to look very carefully for them. Can anyone spot anything hiding in this pool? We can clearly see lots of different seaweeds, but did anyone spot the periwinkle? These little sea snails are very common and can be found living on seaweed which it eats. This orange-coloured shell belongs to another type of sea snail called a flat periwinkle. Just like land snails, these creatures move around very slowly. So if you see one scampering about quickly in a rock pool, you can bet you can have just found yourself a little hermit crab. Hermit crabs are born without a protective shell, and so the first thing they have to do is find a new shell to live in, most commonly, but not always, a periwinkle shell. But as they grow bigger, they need to find bigger shells to move into. They can grow to the size of a common whelk shell, which is about 8 centimeters long. Hermit crabs can be very boisterous, often fighting with each other for a particularly beautiful shell. The loser of the fight has to quickly find a new shell to protect its soft body, and the winner can walk away proud of his new home. Another crab you might bump into at the beach is this shore crab. These can be found hiding in the mud under rocks or in seaweed. They have a hard shell for protection and sharp pincers, or claws, that they use to catch and eat their prey. They're opportunistic feeders, which means they'll eat almost anything they can get their claws on, but their favorite foods include shellfish such as mussels, which they can pick at using their strong claws. But be careful, these can get very cranky, so if you see one ready for a fight, it's better to leave them alone, otherwise you risk getting pinched. Now, we're going to start looking under rocks surrounded by shallow pools of water. Remember to be careful here, as you're standing very close to lots of different animals' homes. When we turn rocks over to see what's underneath, it's very important that you put the rock back exactly as you found it, so the animals can continue to live here. One of the first things you might find are these unusual blobs of jelly clinging to the underside of rocks. These are actually sea anemones. There are lots of different species of anemones. These ones are called beadlet anemones and are the most common found on our beach. When the tide comes in, or in rock pools, anemones will let out their tentacles to feed. These contain both sticky and stinging cells. The stinging cells are too weak to hurt us through our strong skin, but is very useful against its prey of shrimp and prawns. Anemones look a lot like plants, which it uses to its advantage. When unsuspecting prey passes by, it will get stuck, allowing the anemone to draw it into its mouth. When we sweep a net carefully through the water of a rock pool, we will often catch prawns. These creatures are almost entirely see-through, meaning that if you look very closely, you can see its organs through its body. This transparency means it can camouflage in any environment. They have long antennae on their heads and small claws on their front 2 pairs of arms. They use their fan-like tails to steer through the water, but they can also flick their tails to jump backwards, so be careful, they might not stick around for too long. The next animal we might find is the butterfish. These eel-like fish are long and thin and can be easily recognized by their black spots running down the length of its back. Butterfish got their name from their slippery feel and their bright yellow fins. They use their slippery scales to defend against predators, as they're often too slippery to catch as they wriggle around. The common blenny is another fish we often find at Grattan Beach. They are mottled green or brown in colour. They got their name as they're very good at camouflaging. They blend in really well amongst the rocks and seaweeds where it's found. They're omnivorous and so will eat seaweed along with smaller fish and shrimp. Blennies have small little pectoral fins under their heads, which they spread out and use as hands to prop themselves up against the rocks for balance. Here's our Tom Pop Lenny. This charismatic little fellow is much harder to find than the common blenny, but it's very easy to identify when we do find him. They have little Christmas tree-shaped tentacles on their head. If you look very closely, you'll see a further 2 tuft-like tentacles on its nostrils, just below its eyes. They're photogenic little creatures, as their clown-like smiling face means they're always ready for their close-up. The last animal we'll talk about is our goby. There are lots of different species of goby found around Ireland. This one is the sand goby, and is one we most often find at our beach. It's sandy coloured to blend in with its surroundings and is often mistaken for a blenny. Gobies are much flatter than blennies, and as you can see here, gobies have 2 dorsal fins on their backs compared to the single dorsal fin of a blenny. We hope you enjoyed learning about some of the animals that we can find on the seashore. Thanks for listening.